Welcome in to Run the League with Grayson Grunhafer on 365 Sports. This week, we're going to be talking all about breakouts and busts for the 2021 season, but most weeks, I'll be previewing kind of the weekend to be in the NFL. We'll start off each week with waiver wire pickups, some of the guys who impressed from the weekend, and then the second episode each week, we'll talk about some of the breakouts and busts for that specific week, and I'll also talk about some of the matchups that are coming up as well to get you all ready for the fantasy football weekend each week. But like I said, this week we're going to be talking about breakouts and busts for the 2021 season, so let's get it. First off, Jalen Hurts, the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. I really like this one, and if you are kind of looking at it from, it's just a weird perspective these days, the quarterback position, because in fantasy football, the ability to run the football from the quarterback position is becoming a trend nowadays, and I think it continues this year. Jalen Hurts averaged 68 yards rushing per game in his 5 starts. That's huge upside. I mean, that's 6.8 fantasy points. That's just the baseline. He's probably going to run for 1,000 yards almost for sure, as long as he stays healthy, which again, that gives you the safe floor. Now it's just a matter if he takes a step forward as a quarterback. I think if you look at the roster that they've added, Devontae Smith, I think, is a big one from Alabama, an absolute freak show at wide receiver. I think he'll help out Jalen Hurts quite a bit. I think Jalen Reagor could take a step forward. I think this team is going to be pretty bad. So he's going to be forced to throw the ball, forced to run the football. And I think that means good things in fantasy football. So a couple other stats. Weeks 14 through 17, he was the quarterback 7 in fantasy football. That is a short sample size. I understand that. But it just shows kind of the ceiling that he has. And if he can take any step forward, he's got a shot being, honestly, the quarterback 1 overall. You can't say that about many guys, but I think Jalen Hurts has that as a possibility. And when you're drafting him as the quarterback 14, I mean, that's a bargain. That's an absolute bargain. I like pairing Jalen Hurts with maybe a safer floor guy. If you can get a Ryan Tannehill late or a Ben Roethlisberger late, that's a pretty good combination there so that you can kind of try to capitalize on the upside, but also minimizing the risk of taking him. So Jalen Hurts is the quarterback that I'm trying to target in all of my fantasy drafts this year. Now, moving on to the running back position, how about a guy who really disappointed people last year? And for good reason. Clyde EdwardsHelaire, the consensus #1 overall pick in all dynasty formats last year. A guy who everyone thought was going to walk into Kansas City and absolutely dominate. Did not happen thanks to injuries, thanks to not really being utilized as much in the passing game as many people thought he would be. It just didn't all come together, and it was kind of confusing because Damian Williams, he decided he wasn't going to play due to COVID. And so you're sitting there and going, wow, everything's going to run through CEH. And again, it just didn't happen. But he's a guy who is still tied to that Kansas City offense, which if they decide to run the football, if they decide to give him the carries in the red zone, I mean, there's an opportunity that he could be the RB1 in all fantasy football. And once again, there aren't a lot of guys who have that kind of upside. I think for me, when I'm thinking about drafting Clyde EdwardsHelaire, it's really if you're at the beginning of your drafts where you can start off with either, CMC, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. So you have your RB1, and then when it comes back around to you, you can get your star wide receiver or your star tight end in the second round, maybe a Calvin Ridley, or maybe DeAndre Hopkins falls to, or Darren Waller, one of those guys. And then in the third round, you can get Clyde EdwardsHelaire. I mean, that's a heck of a start to your draft. So Clyde EdwardsHelaire is absolutely a guy that I'm targeting. I think he's more deserving of a second round pick. I think he compares very favorably to some of the guys in that round, but to get him in the third just makes his value so much better. So he's my running back choice for breakout this season. At wide receiver now, another guy who I think is kind of being overlooked and extremely disrespected, and that's Tyler Lockett. I mean, this is a guy who is, right now, his ADP is wide receiver 21. He's played in all 16 games last 3 years. No wide receiver has played in more games. So you know he's going to play. He's going to find ways to get on the field. And because of that, I think he's just kind of a no-brainer as a guy who you could take earlier in rounds. I mean, DK Metcalf is going to take up a lot of attention, but he's not going to get every target. He's got Russell Wilson as his quarterback. He saw the most targets in his career a year ago. He's a guy who everyone's kind of turned off from because of the simple fact that he had massive breakout weeks. He had 3 massive weeks, and then he had some weeks where he was just really, really bad. But if he's your wide receiver 3 and you get his 50-point week that he had a year ago, you're winning that week. And he's a guy who I think is big boom or bust potential. But I love that, having that in your lineup, because there's a chance that he could be, that guy who complements your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 really well. I'd also be fine with him as my wide receiver 2. I think he's guaranteed a top 17 finish with Russell Wilson as his quarterback. He got an extension from his team, so all signs are pointing in the right direction for Tyler Lockett. I think he's just being disrespected, and I'm going to take him in every single draft I can in the 5th or 6th round. I think he's the perfect fit there. I'd even consider taking him in the 4th round. So now moving on to the tight end position, a guy who, once again, it's all about value when you talk about breakouts, because you can say a guy like Darren Waller is going to take an even bigger step forward. You could say George Kittle, but those are obvious guys. You got to look for the value picks. And a guy like Tyler Higbee at the tight end position is exactly that. He's getting chosen as tight end 13. So he's going in the 10th round or later. He's your first tight end that you can take and feel really, really safe about it, while loading up on value at the running back and wide receiver positions. Gerald Everett moved to the Seattle Seahawks this year, so that opens up even more things for Higbee. You saw Matthew Stafford with TJ Hawkinson last year. The targets just funneled through TJ, and I think it could be very similar for Higbee this year, except you also have to add this factor in. This team has Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp on the outside, really drawing a lot of attention, plus they have a very good run game. I think Higbee's going to be in great situations to be wide open this year. He had some monster weeks 2 years ago, especially when Gerald Everett was out of the lineup. He was a top 5 tight end for 3 straight weeks, and I think more of that is going to happen this year. Now, do I think he's going to be a top 3 tight end? No, but I think he can definitely be a top 5 tight end, and taking him at tight end 13, that makes his value extremely high. So, enough with all the praise. Now we got to get into the bust. The guys who I think you should not be drafting, guys I'm staying away from this year in all of my drafts. And again, it's all about value. These guys are good players, but I just can't see myself taking them where they're getting chosen this season. So the first one at quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, QB 8. That ADP, it's just too early for me. I know he was the quarterback 2 last year, but it was just the perfect storm and the perfect situation. Aaron was capitalizing on all the red zone opportunities, throwing the ball to Davante Adams basically every time they had the ball at the 1-yard line. That's not going to happen this year. I think Aaron Jones will kind of take away some of those opportunities running the football, and I also think A.J. Dillon could play a factor as well in the red zone. I see regression coming. He had 51 touchdowns last year just to get him the QB2. So let's say he takes a step back and throws, 30 touchdowns, ends up with 40 touchdowns. Then he's going to be right around QB8, and I think that's where his upside is, and that's where he's getting drafted. So you're not really getting a whole lot of upside, but you're also kind of taking a risk, because if he doesn't put up huge numbers, there's a chance he falls outside the top 10. He doesn't run the ball a lot, and I think that just drastically affects him. Plus all the drama this offseason, I'm just kind of staying away from Aaron Rodgers this year. Davante Adams I'm fine with, because he's just the target hog in that offense. But Aaron Rodgers, I'll pass on. I'll take guys later who I think present similar upside and at better values. At running back, let's talk about Miles Sanders, the running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's having issues right now. So all camp, they've talked about the fact that he's just not getting the job done in the receiving game, and how he's not a true workhorse running back. So that's going to take him off the field on 3rd downs. They drafted Kenny Gainwell this year, the running back out of Memphis, who was thought to be the best pass-catching running back in this class. So you put that together, I mean, it just makes sense. Miles Sanders is going to be the first and second down running back in an offense that has Jalen Hurts, who is going to run the football as well, and steal touchdowns from Miles Sanders. It's a recipe for disaster. And right now, he's getting chosen in rounds 4 or 5. That price tag is too rich for me. And he was getting drafted in round 3 recently. So I'm going to pass on him. If he falls to you in round 6, that's a little different. But rounds 4 and 5, I just can't do it. There's a lot of factors that come into play in this situation. But I think the Eagles are going to be trailing. They're going to be throwing the football, which is going to take Miles Sanders off the field. And I think Hurts takes away a lot of his upside because of his rushing volume and vulturing of touchdowns in the red zone. At the wide receiver position now, another guy who just all offseason, things have just not been trending in the right direction for Kenny Golladay. He got paid $72 million for 4 years. So he's getting paid like a wide receiver 1, like a high-end guy, but he's been injured with a hamstring most of camp. Bad offensive reports with Daniel Jones. I'm just consistently hearing this team is going to be bad. There's just a chance they're competing for the number 1 overall pick. I don't like that. I know that means they might be throwing the football, but it just seems like their offense is just terrible. You throw in the factor that they have Saquon Barkley back, so they might rely on the run game a little bit more. Plus, Saquon's guaranteed pretty much 100 targets. So there's 100 targets taken away. Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram, Kadarius Toney. That's a lot of mouths to feed. Now, do I think Kenny G's better than all of those guys outside of Saquon? Yes, but if he's not healthy, and if this offense is not explosive, what's the real upside there? And he's a guy who's getting drafted in most drafts in round 6, sometimes in round 5. I'm staying away from Kenny Golladay unless maybe he falls all the way to the 10th, but that's just simply not going to happen. Stay away from Kenny G. When guys are having bad practice reports, it's not a good thing, especially as the season is coming up really, really soon. Finally, the tight end position, my last bust of the week and for this 2021 season, Dallas Goedert. He's a guy, ADP, tight end, number 8. He's a guy who a lot of people have talked about a lot as having a high upside, but that's when everyone thought Zach Ertz was not going to be on this team last year or coming into this year, and Zach is still on the team. And because of that, that really limits his upside. I think Zach Ertz is still going to get tons of targets. It seems like he's been impressing with Jalen Hurts, so I think it's going to be both of these guys on the field. And Dallas Goedert has been most successful when Zach Ertz is not there. And since he is, I won't be spending on Dallas Goedert. I'd rather wait for a guy like Tyler Higbee or Logan Thomas in the later rounds. So that's it. That's my breakouts and busts for the 2021 season. Again, this is all about where guys are drafted. Where can you find the value? And right now, these are some of the guys that I think have really good value and really bad value heading into the 2021 season. So this has been Run the League on 365 Sports.